A grande latte at Starbucks costs around $7 depending on where you live. The actual cost of the ingredients, the coffee, milk, water, cup, lid, is somewhere between 28 and 35 cents. That is a margin of roughly 2,000%. And here is the thing that should bother us but somehow doesn't. We keep buying it anyway. Starbucks serves roughly 100 million customers per week across 38,000 locations in 86 countries. It is one of the most profitable restaurant chains in the world. And it built that empire not by selling coffee cheaper or faster or better than anyone else, but by convincing you that what you are buying is not coffee at all. This is the story of how a company from Seattle turned a commodity product into an experience you are willing to pay 20 times cost for, and why that strategy worked when almost nobody thought it would. The Starbucks story begins not in Seattle but in Milan, Italy, in 1983. Howard Schultz, a sales executive for a small Seattle coffee roaster called Starbucks, was attending a trade show in Milan when he walked into an Italian espresso bar for the first time. What he saw there changed his life and eventually changed American coffee culture completely. The espresso bar was crowded, social, energetic. The barista knew customers by name, made drinks with skill and speed, and created an atmosphere that felt somewhere between a bar and a living room. People stood at the counter, talked to each other, lingered. The coffee was secondary to the experience. Schultz walked out of that espresso bar convinced he had just seen the future of coffee in America. He flew back to Seattle and tried to convince the owners of Starbucks to replicate the model. They said no. They were coffee roasters, not restaurant operators. Howard Schultz left Starbucks in 1985 and started his own coffee bar company called Il Giornale, Italian for the daily. He opened 3 locations in Seattle modeled directly on the Italian espresso bars he had fallen in love with in Milan. The first NS were not immediately successful. Americans did not understand espresso. They did not know how to order it, did not know the drink names, and honestly found the whole experience a little intimidating. Schultz had to teach an entire market how to consume the product he was selling, but slowly, the concept worked. By 1987, Il Giornale was profitable enough that when the original Starbucks owners decided to sell, Schultz raised the money to buy it. He renamed everything Starbucks, kept the green mermaid logo, and began expanding the espresso bar concept under a brand that already had some recognition. The modern Starbucks was born. If you are interested in how companies take cheap commodities and turn them into premium experiences people will overpay for, subscribe to SnapOldBusiness. We cover the real stories behind the brands that shaped your world, the strategies they used, and the psychology that makes them work. Subscribe now and let us get to the part where Starbucks figures out it is not actually selling coffee. Howard Schultz had a concept he called the third place. Home is the first place. Work is the second place. Starbucks would be the third place, a comfortable space between those two where you could relax, meet people, read, work on your laptop, or just sit. This was not a new idea. European cafes had been third places for centuries. American diners had served a similar function. What Schultz understood that others had missed was that by the 1990s, American cities had lost most of their third places. Malls were dying, diners were disappearing, bars were too specific and too late night. There was an entire category of social infrastructure that had quietly vanished, and nobody had filled the gap. Starbucks filled it, and once people started using Starbucks as their third place, they stopped comparing it to other coffee shops. They started comparing it to the value of having a place to go that was not home and not work. That is a completely different value proposition. The drink customization model that Starbucks pioneered is one of the most underappreciated pieces of the business strategy. When you order a drink at Starbucks, you are not ordering coffee. You are specifying a series of choices: size, milk type, number of shots, flavor additions, hot or iced, whipped cream or not. Each choice makes the drink feel more yours. The barista writes your customizations on the cup in Sharpie. Then they call out your name when the drink is ready, usually getting it slightly wrong, which creates a small human moment. The whole process is designed to make you feel like you are getting something personal and unique rather than a mass-produced commodity. And honestly, it works. People feel ownership over their Starbucks order in a way they do not feel about coffee they make at home or buy at a diner. That emotional attachment allows Starbucks to charge prices that would be absurd for a generic cup of coffee. The expansion of Starbucks through the 1990s was one of the most aggressive retail rollouts in American history. Schultz opened stores fast, sometimes multiple stores in the same neighborhood, using a strategy called clustering. The idea was to saturate a geographic area so completely that Starbucks became unavoidable. Critics said Starbucks was cannibalizing its own sales by putting stores too close together. Schultz argued the opposite. More stores meant more convenience, which drove higher overall usage. A customer who had to walk 10 minutes to Starbucks might go twice a week. A customer who had to walk 2 minutes might go 5 times a week. The closer the store, the more habitual the behavior. By 2000, Starbucks had 3,500 locations. By 2007, it had over 15,000. The green mermaid logo was everywhere. In 2008, Starbucks hit a wall. The financial crisis destroyed consumer spending. Starbucks, which had been growing relentlessly for 2 decades, suddenly started closing stores and missing earnings targets. The stock price collapsed from $40 to under $8. Howard Schultz, who had stepped down as CEO in 2000, came back to run the company again. What he found when he returned was not just a recession problem. It was an identity problem. Starbucks had grown so fast that it had lost the thing that made it special. Stores felt generic. Baristas were under. The espresso machines had been replaced with fully automatic models that were faster but made the drinks taste worse. Schultz had built Starbucks on the idea of craft and human connection, and the company had sacrificed both for efficiency and growth. He spent the next 3 years fixing it. One of the most dramatic moves Schultz made was closing every Starbucks location in America for 3 hours on February 26, 2008, to retrain every barista on how to make espresso properly. 7,000 stores, 70,000 employees, all closed simultaneously. The media covered it like a corporate disaster. Analysts said it would cost tens of millions in lost sales and look like a public admission of failure. Schultz did it anyway. The training focused on the basics: how to pull a shot, how to steam milk, how to interact with customers. It was not about teaching new techniques, it was about reminding the entire organization what Starbucks was supposed to be. The retraining was expensive, disruptive, and widely mocked. It also worked. Customer satisfaction scores improved immediately. The crisis forced Starbucks to decide what it actually valued, and the company chose quality and experience over short-term profit. The mobile ordering and payment system that Starbucks introduced in 2011 is another piece of the business model that is easy to overlook but extremely important. The Starbucks app lets you order ahead, pay with your phone, and earn loyalty points automatically. By 2023, roughly 30% of all Starbucks orders in the United States were placed through the app. This is a bigger deal than it sounds like. Mobile ordering reduces friction, increases frequency, and captures data on every purchase. Starbucks knows what you order, when you order it, how often you visit, and which promotions make you spend more. That data lets them personalize offers in ways that traditional coffee shops cannot match. The app also creates a closed ecosystem. Once you load money onto your Starbucks account, you are psychologically more likely to spend it at Starbucks rather than switching to a competitor. The app turns occasional customers into habitual ones. The pricing strategy Starbucks uses is deliberately designed to make you feel like you are getting value, even when you are massively overpaying. A tall coffee is around $2.50, a grande is $3, a venti is $3.50. The price difference between sizes is small enough that most people upgrade to the larger size because it feels like better value per ounce. The same thing happens with customizations. Adding a shot of espresso is 60 cents. Adding flavor is 70 cents. Each add-on feels cheap individually, but they stack. A basic latte becomes a $5 or $6 drink after customizations, and you barely notice the price increasing because each individual decision felt small. This is called price anchoring, and Starbucks has perfected it. You are comparing the upgraded drink to the base drink, not to the actual cost of coffee, which makes the whole thing feel reasonable even when it is not. Starbucks does not just sell coffee, it sells real estate access. The company targets high-traffic urban locations, often paying premium rents to be on the best corners in the most visible spots. This is the opposite of how most retail chains think. Most retailers try to minimize rent. Starbucks maximizes visibility and foot traffic even if it means higher rent. Because a Starbucks on a busy corner does not just serve the people who walk in, it serves as a billboard for the brand. Every person who walks past a Starbucks is reminded that Starbucks exists, which increases the likelihood they will visit a different location later. The stores are advertisements for themselves. The more visible they are, the more valuable the brand becomes, even beyond the revenue that specific location generates. Starbucks is essentially buying brand awareness through real estate placement, and then monetizing that awareness across thousands of locations. The seasonal drinks that Starbucks releases every year, the pumpkin spice latte being the most famous example, are not just marketing gimmicks. They are sophisticated behavioral triggers. The pumpkin spice latte was introduced in 2003. It is now a $600 million product on its own. The seasonal model creates urgency. You cannot get a pumpkin spice latte in January, which means when it comes back in September, people rush to buy it before it disappears again. Limited availability creates artificial scarcity, which increases perceived value and drives impulse purchases. Starbucks also uses the seasonal launches to bring back lapsed customers. Someone who has not visited Starbucks in months might come in specifically for the pumpkin spice latte, then get pulled back into the habit of regular visits. The seasonal drinks are customer acquisition and reactivation tools disguised as menu items. One of the most interesting dimensions of the Starbucks story is what it reveals about how people actually make purchasing decisions. Standard economic theory says people buy things based on price and quality. They compare options, weigh costs against benefits, and choose the best value. Starbucks proves that model is incomplete at best. When you buy a Starbucks latte, you are not optimizing for cost per ounce or caffeine per dollar. You are buying the experience of ordering something customized with your name on it. the reliability of knowing it will taste the same every time, the social signal of carrying a Starbucks cup, the convenience of locations everywhere, and the comfort of a familiar space. All of those things are real value. They are just not the kind of value that shows up in a cost-benefit spreadsheet. Starbucks understood this before most economists did. The criticisms of Starbucks are worth taking seriously because they reveal genuine tensions in the business model. Starbucks has been accused of displacing local coffee shops, homogenizing urban culture, paying workers too little while charging customers too much, and contributing to disposable cup waste on a massive scale. All of these criticisms are partly true. Starbucks does displace local competitors. It does create a monoculture. Barista wages are low relative to the prices customers pay. The company generates billions of disposable cups annually. The question is whether those costs are outweighed by the value Starbucks creates: access to decent coffee in places that had none, stable employment for hundreds of thousands of people, and a replicable third-place model. Reasonable people can disagree about that balance. What is not debatable is that Starbucks changed how Americans consume coffee and how they think about public space. The international expansion of Starbucks required adapting the American third-place model to very different cultural contexts. In China, for instance, Starbucks had to overcome the fact that China has a massive tea-drinking culture and no tradition of coffee consumption at all. Starbucks succeeded in China by positioning itself not as a coffee company but as a Western lifestyle brand. A Starbucks in Shanghai or Beijing is aspirational in a way that a Starbucks in Seattle is not. It signals modernity, international sophistication, and upward mobility. The company also adapted the menu significantly, adding tea-based drinks and local flavors. Today, China is Starbucks' second largest market after the United States, with over 6,000 stores. The success there shows that what Starbucks is really selling, status, experience, consistency, is culturally adaptable even when the product itself is foreign. The relationship between Starbucks and remote work is a fascinating case study in unintended consequences. Starbucks built the third-place model around people who would come in, order a drink, and stay for an hour or two. But the rise of laptops and free Wi-Fi turned Starbucks into a de facto remote office for freelancers, students, and remote workers. Some people now sit in Starbucks for entire workdays, buying one drink and occupying a seat for 8 hours. From a pure revenue per square foot perspective, this is terrible for Starbucks, but from a brand perspective, it reinforces the third-place positioning. The fact that people feel comfortable working from Starbucks all day means the company successfully created the kind of space it wanted to create. Starbucks has chosen not to crack down on laptop users in most locations because the cost of alienating that customer segment would be higher than the cost of the occupied seats. 3 lessons from Starbucks that apply to any business in any category. First, you are not selling the product. You are selling the experience around the product. Starbucks does not compete on coffee quality or price. It competes on convenience, customization, atmosphere, and brand. Those intangible factors create defensible competitive advantages that commodity products cannot match. If your business can be reduced to a price per unit comparison, you are in a race to the bottom. If you can make the purchase about something other than the product itself, you can charge premium prices. Second, small frictions matter more than big features. The Starbucks app, the mobile ordering, the loyalty points, these are not revolutionary, but they remove friction from the purchase process, which increases frequency. A customer who visits 3 times a week because ordering is easy is more valuable than a customer who visits once a week because the coffee is slightly better. Third, ubiquity creates value. The more Starbucks stores there are, the more useful the brand becomes, because you can rely on finding one wherever you go. This is the opposite of exclusivity-based luxury, but it works just as well for a different kind of premium positioning. The Howard Schultz story is also worth examining separately from the Starbucks story, because it is one of the clearest examples of founder-driven culture in modern business. Schultz grew up in public housing projects in Brooklyn. His father was a truck driver who was injured at work and had no health insurance, no savings, and no support. That experience shaped how Schultz built Starbucks. The company offers health insurance to part-time employees, which is extremely rare in retail. It offers stock options to baristas. It paid for employees to complete college degrees. These policies cost Starbucks hundreds of millions of dollars and reduced short-term profitability. Schultz did them anyway because he believed companies have obligations beyond shareholder returns, whether you agree with his politics or not. The fact that one person's childhood experience of economic precarity shaped the employment policies of a company with 400,000 employees is remarkable. Founders matter. A grande latte costs $7.30 of ingredients. That 2,000% margin is not the result of price gouging or corporate greed. It is the result of a company that understood earlier and more clearly than almost any competitor that people do not buy coffee based on cost per ounce. They buy it based on how it makes them feel, where they can drink it, how convenient it is to get, and what it signals to others. Starbucks built a business model around those intangible values and turned a commodity into a premium experience. Whether you think that is brilliant or cynical probably depends on whether you are standing in line at Starbucks right now or not. Subscribe if this one was worth your time. See you in the next one.